Over the course of a lifetime, the average person gives roughly 90,000 hours to work. Not to sleep, not to children, not to rest, not to the moments that will actually stay in memory, but to emails, meetings, tasks, reports, screens, and calendars. The same calendars that sometimes seem to know your day better than you do. And if that thought does not inspire you, maybe the problem is not your laziness, not weak discipline, not a lack of ambition. Maybe your reaction is not the strange part. Maybe the system is. Because for most of human history, work, in the modern sense, did not exist. There were no salaries, no bosses, no career path where you had to spend years proving you were a team player, while the team somehow spent most of its time on calls. And then the question becomes more important. How did labor, once just a part of life, become the center of it? To understand how unusual our lives have become, imagine a morning without work. Not a weekend, not a vacation, not a short breath before Monday. A world where the very idea of a workday does not yet exist. A person wakes up not because of an alarm, not because they have to be in an office in an hour, and not because their day has already been carved into meetings by people who probably do not want to attend those meetings either. They wake up because it has become light. The camp is coming alive. The fire needs tending, a basket needs checking, a tool needs picking up, a child needs watching, food needs finding. There are things to do. But this is not yet work as the sale of time. A person does not have a job title in place of an identity. They are valued for skill, reliability, generosity, and connection with others. The day does not belong to a system. The day belongs to life. But if there was no work, how much time did survival actually take? This is where we reach the part modern work culture would probably rather not discuss, because the numbers are inconvenient. In the 1960s, anthropologist Richard Lee studied the Jew/Hwanzi in the Kalahari in what is now Botswana. This was not a time machine and not an exact copy of the Paleolithic world, but it is one of the best ways we have to understand what life can look like without salaries, offices, and bosses. Lee found that adults spent about 2.5 days a week acquiring food, roughly 17 hours. Similar estimates appeared among other hunter-gatherer groups as well. The Hadza in Tanzania, the Ache in Paraguay, and the Martu in Australia. This does not mean people spent the rest of their time lying around, waiting for someone to invent the couch. They repaired things, cared for children, cooked, talked, learned. But they were not giving 40 hours a week to someone else's schedule. And that already feels almost indecent. But observations of modern groups alone are not enough. We need traces that do not depend on someone's testimony. And those traces remained in bones. When archaeologists compare the remains of hunter-gatherers and early farmers, the familiar story of progress becomes less smooth. The first farmers were often shorter. Their teeth suffered more from cavities because grain-heavy food offered plenty of carbohydrates but less variety. Their joints and spines carried the marks of repetitive strain, the same movements, day after day, season after season. Agriculture made it possible to feed more people, but for the individual body, it often meant a poorer diet, more wear, and less freedom of movement. In other words, the system became stronger, and the body received the bill. Bones do not argue about progress. They simply show its price. And if people were not spending the entire day hunting or farming, what were they doing? The answer feels strange only to us. When humans gain time beyond survival, they do not become empty. They begin to create culture. Around 30,000 years ago, in Chauvet Cave in southern France, people painted horses, lions, and rhinoceroses with an understanding of movement shadow, and form. These were not random lines. Someone went deep into a cave, carried pigment, worked by firelight, and spent energy not on food, but on meaning. In Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found ancient shells with holes drilled through them. Ornaments. Small objects that say, humans cared not only about surviving, but about showing who they were. And in Germany, researchers found a bone flute around 40,000 years old. Music. Ornaments. Stories around the fire. Children raised not by one exhausted mother alone, but by the whole group. They were not building careers, they were building bonds. And perhaps that was a more honest form of occupation. But here it is important not to slip into a beautiful fairy tale. This was not paradise. For the absence of bosses, people paid with the absence of antibiotics. For a freer day, they paid with the risk that a simple infection could become fatal. For life without an office, they lived without hospitals, ambulances, or any guarantee that a child would survive illness or a hungry season. A broken leg might not mean sick leave, but dependence on the whole group. A failed hunt was not a ruined mood, but real fear. Drought, childbirth, a predator near the camp, an infected wound, all of it was part of reality. The past was not a utopia. There was no HR department. But there was no dentistry either. And that is exactly why the question becomes stronger. If hunter-gatherer life was dangerous, why did the shift to farming still make the human body more tired, more damaged, and more dependent? The answer is not that people were stupid. The answer is that they were trapped. The most successful trap in history did not look like a prison. It looked like a wheat field. Around 10,000 years ago, in the region of the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East, people began staying more often near wild grains. At first, this made sense. Grain could be gathered, dried, stored, and used to survive a hard season. But grain has one special quality. It can be counted. And anything that can be counted can be divided. Stored, guarded, taken, taxed. Very quickly, a surplus becomes not only food, but control. A field demands discipline. You cannot tell a harvest, "Today is not my day." You have to sow, weed, wait, protect, gather, year after year. And the more food the field produced, the more people there were. Children could be fed porridge earlier. Populations grew. Then, going back became almost impossible. The wild world could no longer feed that many people. Humans planted grain for security. But along with security, a cage began to grow. The main change did not happen when humans began to labor. Humans had always labored. The change happened when a system appeared between effort and result. At first, a person worked to eat what they had found or hunted. Later, they worked to give away part of what they had grown. Then, someone else counted the surplus, distributed it, protected it, demanded a share, and decided who should do what. That is how storage appeared. Guards, accounting, obligations, early specialists, people who were no longer getting food directly, but supporting the growing structure of settlement. And the more complex that structure became, the farther a person moved from the result of their own labor. They could work all day and not see the fruit of it immediately, not hold it in their hands, not share it with loved ones around the fire. Time gradually became a resource that could be counted, bought, distributed, and taken. An invisible tax, a very old one, and a suspiciously durable one. That is why 40 hours today feel like more than tiredness. They feel like a loss of autonomy. The problem is not that humans sometimes have to make an effort. Our bodies know how to labor. They know how to walk long distances, carry weight, learn, repair, care, repeat a difficult movement. When it has direct meaning. Something else breaks us. A life where almost all time has already been assigned before we touch it. When your calendar knows your day before you have lived it. When your body sits still while your brain receives threat signals all day. When conversation turns into a meeting, rest turns into recovery for future performance, and a free evening becomes a short pause before the next alarm. They call it balance, although it looks like someone adjusted the scales in advance. You do not have to hate labor, but you have the right to ask why almost all of life must be organized around it. This does not mean you have to hate work. And it does not mean the answer is to return to a cave. The question is deeper. If our bodies were formed in a world where labor was part of life, why has life become part of work? Maybe freedom is not the absence of effort. Maybe freedom is when your time belongs, at least a little, to you again, and not to a system that calls it a normal schedule.